Hey guys, Jen here once again. The conclusion of second day of the 2022 World Championship group stage had some interesting results, with Fnatic and Rogue beating their current counterparts, with Fnatic beating T1 and Rogue beating DRX. And in both of these games, we saw the Akali versus Azir matchup, with the Azir being played by the European team and the Akali being played by the LCK team. Now, Akali is traditionally a strong scaling pick, and we're going to be exploring a little bit of her strengths, but this is why I think LCK will have a problem playing this champion during this tournament. But before we go into the details, let's take a look as to what Akali does as a champion. Like I mentioned earlier, she's a strong scaling team fight option. As we have seen, this champion has been a very high presence, I think, ever since she got a rework in Season 8 Worlds. And ever since then, she has always been a staple of longer scaling metas as one of the stronger assassins that can one-shot a backline towards the later stages of the game. And to add on to this, she's also a very strong silent duelist, which enables her to contest for priority on her own on-site and be able to sneak waves as well. The downsides of Akali is that this is a champion that has a low agency in the laning phase and generally draws resources, requiring the supporting jungle to help her out. The reason why she's generally picked into Azir is that Azir's kit usually forces and neutralizes a lot of agency from opposing mid laners, and most mid lane matchups against Azir will require support and jungle help anyways. So Akali then becomes an answer to Azir, where she then is able to assess the backline with her Assassin toolkit and be able to match the scaling that the Emperor Shurima brings. Now, this can change though when the opponent team has specialist tools such as the likes of the most commonly played Twisted Fate and a softer one in terms of Kai'Sa to handle Akali, and I think more recently as well during the World's meta, Maokai has appeared as well. And the reason why Akali is so strong in these team fights is that she has creative ways to ignore marking and zoning setups when approaching second on an objective, but if these specialist tools are present, that can kind of shut it down. But most of the times, if you're up against an enchanted support, there's no reliable lockdown, no point and click CC to deal with the Akali or reveal her in a shroud, this champion usually goes unchecked in the later game teamfights. So this makes her good as a rough conditional scaling win condition if they do not have the specialist tools and you're up against a mid lane that's not really able to punish you, then this is a good pick to have in the later stages of the draft, and is particularly good against Drake stacking compositions, which generally want to set up on objectives, as Akali tends to ignore those setups. As we saw in T1 versus EDG, if you were to watch the second Drake fight, T1 did play the Akali, it was also against an Azir, but the difference was that EDG was playing it as a Drake stacking composition with a Kalista Renata bot lane. Without enough tools to deal with Akali, Faker was able to pop off in that game and put on a strong carry performance as Akali. However, we have to take a look as to when the champion goes bad as well. Now, DRX and Rogue, they both opted for somewhat scaling compositions in their matchup during the group stage. So for Rogue, it's a much more simple approach towards things. They're looking to get first set up on the objectives, stand up things with the Azir, control the entrances of the river and kite backwards, and mark potential flanks. Whereas if DRX wants to take fights against them, they want to approach with numerical advantages, playing a big composition of swords, playing 3 side lanes, or find good flank angles. Now in this case, the good flank angles is what you're aiming for, and this is what Akali usually tends to enable, as she's able to ignore a lot of the marking that the likes of a Nami or Trundle can do, and find very easy access onto the Lucian or Azir. However, the presence of Maokai the Rogue has kind of shuts that down, as the saplings are able to easily spot out Akali's position, slow her down in their push towards the teamfight. The ultimate basically erases half of the map that Akali can access to, and on top of that, the point and click CC from the Twisted Advance on Maokai's W makes it difficult for Akali to reliably get in and assassinate the opponent backline. So DRX should probably have identified this, that if they were going to be drafting Akali into the Maokai, they have to be using her out of the strong part of the kit and playing through side lanes and using Akali as a duelist instead. Now that was not done by DRX, and they opted into team fighting against Rogue, where the Maokai was simply unkillable and Rogue was able to win that game against the LCK team. You'd expect that this is something that might be addressed by a better team like T1. Now T1 also went for an Akali, and they went for Akali and Jax. However, they went with a very traditional LCK macro setup, playing 1, 2, 2, and 3 lanes. Now, the thing about playing Akali and Jax is that when you have these low wave clear champions that are strong duelists and side lanes, is that is how you have to progress the game. But when you play 1, 2, 2, and 3 lanes, as what T1 did in this game, is a great way for maximizing farm and hitting your scaling power spikes, but it ends up in a situation where you disconnect your support and jungle. So you aren't really able to enforce a quote-unquote strong side of the map, and as a result, your ability to control the map is traded off in exchange for being able to maximize farm and catch three lanes of farm relatively safely. So if we were to take a look at a snapshot of the map at this point of time, now this is the European style of playing where they would approach through mid and they place a great emphasis on resetting faster than the opponents. In this case, the Lucian army is able to enforce that as well because they have a great burst potential in the mid lane, and thus the Philistine Trash have to respect that. So they're able to access the bot side river, and LPL teams will be able to do this as well if they approach through side. So many ways that they can access the river. And look at how the structure of the map disconnects the Jax and Viego from the Philistine Trash. With this disconnection of the support and AD carry from the top lane and jungler, cutting off the two men on mid makes it difficult for T1 to effectively progress the game. Unless, of course, Akali tries to find this solo outplay on the Azir, finding a kill on the top side of the map. Now with this happening, both teams end up scaling and reaching towards their power points. Unlike the game against EDG, where they were up against a Kalista and Renata, in this case, Fnatic has a team composition that can match them in terms of scaling as well. And thus, not being able to progress the game puts T1 into a difficult situation, where they're then forced to try to collapse in response to fights, in which disconnecting the mid duo on mid was the key factor that enabled Fnatic to win those fights and secure the lead and the game for themselves. And with that, if you enjoy this style of content, you can support me by going to my Patreon, which I'll be linking in the description of this video, where I will be doing weekly VOD review worksheets using content from the League of Legends 2022 World Championship. With that, I hope this gave you a bigger insight into my usual rants and complaints about the LCK's approach to its macro and this 3-lane farm-centric style of play, while the likes of the Enchanter meta and the Azir meta that dominate the summer playoffs might have rewarded that. I do believe that that will once again be exposed in the World Championship. With that, I wish you a nice day and get hyped for Worlds.